Hi, this is Kamala Murphy, and you are listening to the Heart and Chutzpah podcast, where we talk about giving ourselves permission or having the chutzpah to just claim a right to live really juicy, luscious lives. With our big hearts, we're going to face love and loss, heartache and healing. We'll fall down and rise up again, and through it all, we'll develop our heart and our chutzpah, and we'll find our way to our own unique, luscious, and amazing life. Thank you for joining me. Enjoy this episode. Hi, I'm Kamala Murphy. Welcome to this episode of the Heart and Chutzpah podcast. So glad that you're here. I have a question for you. Have you ever had someone tell you, oh my God, you are just too sensitive or too emotional, and thought that, oh, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm too sensitive and maybe even fragile. There's something wrong with me. I know that I have. Growing up, I was always told, you're just too emotional. Get a thicker skin. You've got to get a thicker skin. And I believed it. So I tended to pull back from connecting with people, because who wants to feel like there's something wrong with you all the time? So, I've gone on like this for all of my life, but in the last several months, I've been seeing a counselor, and she suggested to me that perhaps I could attend one of her trauma skills classes. And I thought, I didn't have much trauma in my life. There were a few things that were sort of bad, but not that big a deal. And she said, well, you present as someone who has had trauma, and kind of a lot of it. And I was kind of shocked. It's like, no, I was never beaten. No one in my family was brutalized. There wasn't domestic violence. I had a pretty normal childhood. And she said, she just pointed out basically, what seems like a normal childhood, you may notice that you are, you keep saying it wasn't that bad. There was nothing really wrong. And yet you tend to be a little on the anxious side a lot of the time. You present as someone who's a little concerned about other people's reactions. And so I thought, okay, I'll sign up for the class and see what transpires, right? So that brought up something, because I'm beginning to think, well, if she's seeing something that I'm not, maybe I should take a little deeper look at some of this. So I happened on program, I believe it was called The Wisdom of Trauma. And one of the speakers, the primary speaker, is Dr. Gabor Maté. And one of the first things that he spoke about, it's sort of not a definition of trauma, but just giving a different perspective about it, was that trauma is not the bad things that happen to you, but rather what happens inside you as a result of the bad things happening to you. And all of a sudden, light bulbs started going on. It's like, oh, well, that's a different way to look at it, right? Because, yes, I know I am sensitive. And personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But I think that as a sensitive kid and growing up in my family, I don't think I had the permission or the ability to process some of the big emotions that I felt when things did go wrong, or there were what other people might consider minor traumas. The way they affected me was bigger. And I had this recollection of a time that it really was clear that although the trauma was not happening to me, I experienced it as big emotions that I could not deal with, at least not at the time. So, as I mentioned, I wasn't ever beaten. I I don't think I was hit or spanked even very often, possibly a handful of times. But this one time, we were with my cousins, and my younger cousin said something to my father and called him a stupid idiot in a 4-year-old language, and he didn't understand, and so he kept asking, and she kept saying "dupid idiot," and finally, when he understood what she was saying, he was furious. And I think I was about 7, and this rage just enveloped him. Um, it was almost as though he became a different person. It was like he started going after her, and I really felt like he was going to kill her. And it was so scary. And even today, and this is many, many, many decades later, I can still feel that fear, that kind of panic, it's interesting because one of the other doctors who speaks about trauma, Bessel van der Kolk, I believe, has written a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it really dawned on me that although the trauma was not happening to me, I did witness it. And still I have energy around it. That trauma, even witnessed, has lodged in my system. So I think this is really important for so many of us. We may, if we are sensitive and not overly necessarily or overly emotional, but we tend to be a little more sensitive, we may have inadvertently experienced traumas that still affect us in one way or another. Because maybe a year ago, another woman that I was working with said something to me about, it's almost as though you feel like any criticism, someone's going to smack you down. And I thought, this is kind of fascinating to me, that something that may have happened 50 or 60 years ago, I still react to something about it, some trigger, in the same way that I would have done at 6 or 10 or 12. And I think this actually happens to a lot more of us than we realize. Instead, we're told that we're too sensitive, that too emotional, that we should just get over it. If you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. And I know even for myself, I've often said, it wasn't that bad. There was nothing really traumatic in my life. So, I can't be experiencing trauma. But these several instances have just made me rethink. And so this episode is really to perhaps shed a little bit of light that maybe if you are very sensitive, if you have always said, oh, everything was fine, I didn't have major trauma, but you still are maybe even plagued by kind of reactions that you don't quite understand. Why would I feel like I'm going to be slapped down when someone makes a comment to me that doesn't feel like it's 100% compliment, right? If someone asks me a question that I don't know and I have to stammer for an answer, then I'm going to feel like I'm being slapped down. So I'm going to invite you to take a breath if you're anything like me. One of the things that we might want to do is take a look and maybe write down, maybe journal some of the stories of incidents in your past that maybe still do have some trigger to them, that if you remember them, you kind of feel yourself tensing up or being anxious or even frightened, something that seems, well, that doesn't make sense. But in the bigger picture, maybe it does. Maybe something insignificant, and I'm quote unquote there, that happened in your past landed energetically in you in a way that you have not been able to process to this day. This is really important because I think so many of us are carrying around wounds and traumas that we have just either denied or made light of because they weren't that bad. So one of the things I wanted to share with you and invite you to practice, not if you're driving, so do this a little bit later if you will, but to think of something that's been going on for you. And because we're so busy, we're so in our heads so much of the time, it's really important for us, especially if we've had some trauma, to come back down into our bodies. So if you will, just take a breath, and notice, how does your body feel? You may be so out of touch with your body that it takes a little bit of doing to actually get in there. How do your shoulders feel? How does your neck feel? How does your torso feel, especially your chest or your belly? I know for me, a lot of the times, without realizing it, I would be pulling my legs up almost as though, get as small as you can, that fight, flight, or freeze. I think I would just pull up as small as I could and just freeze. So if I'm small, no one sees me. Anyway, but back to the body, just noticing, how does your body feel? And how are your emotions? What are you feeling emotionally? You might feel sad or scared or worried. You may feel hopeful and joyful, possibility. But whatever it is, to just notice what your emotions are. And then the third piece is to ask yourself, what is it that I need in this moment? For me, oftentimes it's take a deep breath, because I get kind of tense, and stretch. Actually stand up and stretch, get move my body, dance or bend over, something that just is going to open up my channels of the blood flow and energy flow. So this practice is called Ben. So the body, the emotion, and what do you need? And it's a great tool to get more in touch with what your body is telling you. Because when we're not paying attention, all of these traumas actually take a toll on our body. And there are theories that are pretty prevalent now about when we've had a lot of trauma and we haven't processed it, that inflammation, we experience more inflammation, more autoimmune diseases, high blood pressure, other stress-related illnesses and symptoms. So really, just by starting to notice more and more what your body is telling you, it will be very helpful, so that if there is trauma there, that you can begin to work with it, understand it, give yourself a lot of compassion, because at 5 or 6 or 7 or 12, we didn't know. And chances are, if we came up in abusive or dysfunctional households, there wasn't a lot of room or spaciousness for us to process, especially those big feelings, the anger, the fear, the frustration. So I just invite you to practice this BEN, body, emotion, and needs, as often as possible, and really start to, maybe do a little bit of research that trauma is not the bad things that happen to you, but what happened to you inside of yourself, how you held the experience of what happened to you. I think this is so key, and it can be so helpful to just relieve some of the pressures and anxiety that we put on ourselves. So I hope that this was helpful for people to just, maybe take a different perspective, grant yourself a little mercy, a little compassion, recognize that maybe some things that happened that were insignificant to someone else may have affected you at a deeper level and on an important level, and that you're worth taking a look at this. So thank you for joining me. Have a great week, and I look forward to talking with you soon. Take care. Bye for now. So there you have it, a little heart and chutzpah for the day. Today, give yourself a little permission to be both big-hearted and a little feisty, just like you were created to be. Thank you for joining me. I hope you'll reach out to me via social media at Kamala Murphy, and it's Murphy with an EY, or at my website, kamalamurphy.com. Again, thank you for joining me. Many blessings until next time. Bye for now.